Welcome, everybody. I've got Andy here, and we're here to talk about the state of the modern CCG, TCG market. It's a really exciting time. We were just chatting before the show that I can't think of a time in the last 4 or 5 years where there's been so many major TCGs coming out with real IP, as well as a bunch of indie stuff. So we're going to talk Star Wars Unlimited. We're going to talk Lorcana. We're going to talk the huge bucket of indie games that both of us don't really know much about, but are kind of intrigued by. But why don't we kind of start? You want to start with Lorcana? You want to start with Star Wars Unlimited?
Yeah, you said it's funny. You said it's like an interesting time in the last like 4 or 5 years. It's actually probably like the last 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, there hasn't been like two huge IPs. Like, I mean, they're owned by Disney, but like, I mean, you want to talk about like major IPs, Star Wars and the classic Disney are just like they're just massive, right? And like Lorcana put out their third set Into the Inklands, which has a lot more depth to it. They released locations, and now you can actually like have
Interact
something
more.
to do. There's more interaction, which is always good to create more strategic decision trees and stuff like that. So like, I was really interested in Lorcana. I actually admittedly bought like a bunch of Lorcana.
I knew it. I
I
knew it.
just bought singles, right? I bought 1X cards because I decided I wanted to build a cube for it because I'm not going to actually build like constructed decks to go to a local game store and play Lorcana, but
You don't want to
it
beat a
seemed
12-year-old for
intriguing
like a
enough
Mickey
to,
Mouse deck.
yeah, but it seemed intriguing enough to like build a cube. And I love cubes. I love cubing. I love everything about it. Plus it like checks like a little bit of the like collector itch where you're like, I'm going to buy one of that one. I'm going to buy one of this one. And like, designing the cube is kind of like deck building sort of. So I went kind of on that. So now I'm looking at Into the Inklands, like, oh, what do I want to pick up for this? And there's like some really cool cards in the third set. Like I think Ravensburger did actually a really nice job with the set. And as I'm like looking at it, I get, I'm known probably best online for my involvement in Star Wars CCG, right? And just like all these people, like from like the last 3-4 years of me like interacting with the Star Wars CCG community. Hey, did you try Star Wars Unlimited? Hey, are you going to get into Star Wars Unlimited? Hey, did you do Star Wars? Hey, I went to the pre-release. It was a great time. Game was great. Like all this stuff. And a lot of the Star Wars CCG group that are like open players are really talking about Star Wars Unlimited as well. In fact, like one of the like all-time great Star Wars CCG players, Justin Desai, has like a whole channel devoted to like, strategy and deck building and how to. And so like I looked into it and I was just like, I don't like the art. Straight up, art's pretty bad. There's a couple of pieces that I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool, a little comic booky. All right, I'm good with it. But most of the art, I'm like, man, I'm off it. But like, it actually has some legs to it, right? Like, I'm really intrigued by the like deck building aspect of it. About like, choosing which aspect you want. Obviously, green is really good because that one location is really good, right? But like this color, and it feels like if Magic had decided to make a Star Wars set, but not like really set it within like Magic. I don't know how to best describe that. Like it feels very much like a Magic set, right? Like there's like cards have a cost, they have a aspect color. It's not really like, you want to play Tarmogoyf if it's green and 1, right? Like it just costs 2 resources, but the color aspect influences your deck building choices as well as how much it might cost if you decide to run off color aspects. Probably not a great idea. But and then like, you've got light side and you've got dark side, and I like that you could, again, probably not recommend it, play a light side card in a dark side deck. It just costs more. Probably not a great idea, but like it's an interesting avenue to go down. And then like depending on what like color combinations you want to do. You want to go monocolored, you want to go multicolor, like 2 aspects, 3 aspect. Well, you can't really do 3 aspect color, but like 2 aspect colors, and like just like the way that you're going to structure your turns, like, and then thinking of it like they have power, they have toughness, and they have abilities. So it's very reminiscent of like a modern Magic card. But then there's like keywords, right? There's Sentinel, and there's, you got shields and raid and all this type of stuff. So like, and those feel very like Magic, right? Like if you said that this keyword was lifted directly out of Magic, like some Magic set, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I believe that, right? And so it really feels like it's like a Star Wars Magic set, but not like a part of Magic. I don't know how that better describes it, and that's really interesting to me because I spent so much time playing Magic and Star Wars, and so I was just like, this actually looks pretty great, like to the point where I'm like, I kind of want to actually go to a local game store and draft this, which is like huge. I'm like off of local game stores altogether.
I had a lot of fun at my pre-release event. I think one of the things, this is more of a macro topic, but are we entering into a new golden age of CCGs, right? So I think people might describe the late 90s, early 2000s as sort of the golden age, but right now you could walk into a local game store and see 4 or 5 different games being played in Magic, Pokemon, Star Wars Unlimited now, Lorcana, maybe
Blood, One
Piece,
Sorcery, Alpha Clash. Some of them are bigger than others, right? Like I don't know how much, talking about like some of the indie games like Sorcery and Alpha Clash, like I mean, they don't look terrible. I just don't know enough about them to speak to them, but they seem to have, the people who are into it are like seem really into it. And Sorcery, I've looked into a little bit more. It kind of feels reminiscent of like Magic circa like late 1994, early 1995, where it's like kind of this old school version of Magic, which is kind of neat. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games out there, and it feels different than it ever really did with like, say, like 90s games, or like 90s games was clearly Magic as number one. Star Wars was number two for a long time. And then there was just like this like huge fracturing of, everybody else trying to pick up like 2% of the market, right? Whether it was Legend of the Five Rings or Middle Earth or X-Files or Babylon 5.
Pokemon was also like up, Pokemon was 2 or 3, whatever.
Yeah, that's not till 99. So like if you're talking like core, like real 90s game.
Yeah.
So but then when you get to like, early 2000s, yeah, it's still Magic and Pokemon really dominating that. And then everything else fractures off of that, right? Lord of the Rings from Decipher, or Legend of the Five Rings just lasted forever, or whatever it is, right? But like there was just such a dearth of games from like 2007 to like 2019, right? Like the games were just dead. There was just nothing coming out, Force of Will. I was like, who cares about that game, right? But now it actually feels like, because Magic has just been tanking in like, I mean, it's still the most popular game by like a large country mile. Like Magic's not going anywhere. More popular probably now than ever, but they're just losing. I guess they're probably churning through people faster than they used to, and the lifespan of a player seems to probably be shorter than it used to. But it seems like the other games, Flesh and Blood, Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, I mean, from everything I see with Star Wars Unlimited, it seems actually more popular than Lorcana, right? Like the groups that I'm in, all that stuff, like more activity, more hype around it. Could just be because it's releasing essentially tomorrow. Recording this video. But yeah, it's just like there's a lot of I don't even necessarily want to say hype around some of the games, but there just seems to be a lot of like, all of these games can exist in an ecosystem simultaneously without there having to be like a Magic has 94% of the market and everybody else is fighting for 6%. Like this seems a little bit more like egalitarian, or like the whole playing field of the market like seems a little bit more democratized there, or like.
Yeah, and so I think with Magic, obviously they have the players to lose in all of this, right? As the clear number one. But I think as well with some of these games, due to the power of the IP in something like Lorcana or Star Wars, they have a chance to bring new people into the fold that maybe didn't play card games before or played 20 years ago. And so I think that they're actually growing the pie, and it's not necessarily taking away from Magic. Magic players are way more likely to go to something like Flesh and Blood or, a little more mature of a game. I think what I experienced with Lorcana is, there's still a widespread appeal. There's lots of, hardcore gamers that are into it, but I think that it's growing the pie and exposing people to new, games, new ideas, new mechanics. Because even some of the chatter I see with, Star Wars or Lorcana isn't, hey, this is a Magic clone. They're like, oh, this is how resources work. I didn't know about resource. Like these are not super sophisticated people coming into this market. They're kind of newbies, and that's really good because I think, broadly speaking, the diversity and having new people come into these markets and not just being like the same 20 guys at Magic Nights on Fridays. It's just like really
be a bunch of white guys with backpacks.
Yeah. If they lose their backpack, they will kill themselves because it's worth $6,000.
Yeah. No, but the other thing that I think when we talk about like the growing market or back to my just previous point where like it's not where like everybody's kind of enjoying a slightly bigger piece of the pie, is I think that, and this is just completely conjecture, so don't hold me to this, but like I kind of feel like the average age of card gamers is a little bit older than it was 20 years ago, right? The people who were playing card games 20 years ago generally continued to play card games over a period of time. And like, so like the amount of cards that I could afford at 20 years old or 17 years old is like a lot less than what I can afford at 40. Right. And so like, I'm just like, if I want to get into Star Wars Unlimited, I just get into Star Wars Unlimited. Why not? Right. I can still enjoy all the other games that I enjoy because I have the resource, my own personal resources to be able to enjoy Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. And if I wanted to try sorcery, I can do that as well. Right. And I don't know that if you looked at past, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that the people who were either getting into like card gaming was so nascent at that time that like you didn't have people going, yeah, sure, I'll just play 6 games. Why not?
Yeah. I think that also a couple thoughts on that. One, there's been a lot of barriers to entry that have been broken down. Things like starter decks that are ready to roughly go from the box and not just 60 random cards. And I think one of the points that I was getting at earlier, that there's really just one word to describe it, and it is momentum. It feels like there's momentum in a lot of these communities where they're building on each other. There's positive interactions. There's deck building. I mean, even just going to my YouTube algorithm is just absolutely screwed because it's just like Star Wars Unlimited this, like, Lorcana this. I'm like, man, there is so much content being produced, which is great. I really believe that like everybody can exist, and just because another guy is making a video about Star Wars Unlimited, that doesn't mean it takes away from my stuff. I don't care either.
Right.
It feels like there's positive momentum moving forward, and I think that's really good. And the other thought about sort of the average age of card gamers getting older is, I think, at least my experience being kind of like the kid in the room when I played Star Wars CCG in the 90s, was there's a lot of college kids playing, right? Because video games were a pretty nascent thing at the time. And now I think, a 19-year-old is probably just going to choose to play Fortnite or, whatever, rather than getting into an expensive and complex hobby. So I think that you kind of had this video games grew tremendously in those 20 years, and they supplanted a lot of the space that would have been taken up by college students. Right.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. I mean, I agree. As far as the momentum, right? It feels very much like a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think it's overall it's great to see that all of these games are able to exist and kind of flourish at the same time, and that it gives people choice. And the other part of choice is that unlike 20 or 30 years ago, there are just like very very efficient selling markets. Like
Yes.
if you tried to find a black bordered Darth Vader in 1995, it was like through a mail order catalog from like some guy in like Texas, and they didn't have email, and you had to like write a letter to them and mail them a money order or a cashier's check. It's like, how's this? Now you just go on TCG Player and you're just like, I want this card and I'm just going to add all these, and then it's going to optimize my cart and save me on all this shipping, and it's all coming from direct sellers, and boop, and done. And I can place an order in 5 minutes and it'll be at my house 3 days later. And so I think just having access to those kind of markets to buy and sell that just didn't exist 20, 25, 30 years ago really helps push that momentum.
Yeah, I really think, to go back to my earlier question, that we are entering into a new golden age for CCGs, and it's going to be players, it's going to be collectors, there's going to be some whatever investors in there as well. But I think markets being more efficient has also made it easy for collectors, right? There's also communities and groups you can join, like graded groups or whatever itch you want to scratch. You can probably find some other weirdos on the internet that are doing it that are not in like an HTML like message board, right? It's like Facebook or Discord or Slack. And these platforms just make it way easier to find community. Sure. And you don't have to like remember your login to the message board. So, I mean, I think this is a really exciting time because as these new games are coming out, there's essentially places to catch the community, right? There's groups being set up, and it feels just different than it did in the early 90s. So I'm going to say yes. I think we're at the beginning of the age of this, and who knows how long it will last. It could be a year, but I think there's going to be a lot more games come out. A lot more games are going to fail, right? Like Sorcery, I don't know. Like these games could fail, and that's part of the cycle. But I think right now, Magic is shedding players because they've made the game so damn complicated, and they've kind of been abusive with sets coming out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's okay and to bring new people into this that aren't just like, hey, isn't Magic for dorks? It's like, no, all of these are for dorks, right? So
yeah, I think Flesh and Blood actually standing the testament of time, going on its 5th or 6th year of production, really is the thing that people can point to say, like, they did it, I'm going to do it too, and we're going to release something that's a well-designed, good-looking product. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree. I think we're heading into it might be a golden age. It might be like a really great kind of renaissance, if you will, instead. And I'm excited for that. I was kind of down on Star Wars Unlimited when I saw some of the early cards, but I'm pretty hyped on it, actually. I think it looks like a good game. Art is art, whatever. I'm not playing the game because I want to put pieces of art on the table. If I wanted to do that, I'd just collect non-sport cards or, whatever, right? Which I already do. But like, I'm into it because it looks like a good strategic game, and that's what matters to me.
I absolutely agree. So let's end it on a positive note there. Maybe we're entering into a Bronze Age, Silver Age, maybe Golden Age. But I think there's something happening that has not been happening for a while.
Yeah.
And it's a reason to be interested and excited about these markets.
I agree.
So thanks for hanging out, Andy. Thanks for tuning in. Any final thoughts here?
No, couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you. I'm good with words. All right. I'll catch everyone next time.